Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast. And once again, I am doing this without Ben Kingsley. I've got a co-host with me today. His name is Bradley Beer. Welcome to the Property Couch, Brad.
Thanks, Bryce. Great to be here. I love talking about property.
You do, mate. You are very well qualified. Now, you've been here since the beginning. So you were with us back in episode 10. You were also with us in episode 117. And here we are, episode 351, mate. So it's very rare to get a three-time returning guest, but mate, you are not a guest today. You are the co-host. So there's lots of responsibilities that comes with that.
Feeling a little older now, Bryce.
Well, as Ben's got no right of reply, the benchmark for co-hosting is not that high for your seat. So at least everything is up from here. But no, mate, we had Ben on last week. He was up in the Kimberleys, and we got to talk about the portfolio that he and his lovely wife Jane have built. Which went really well. To be honest, there was lots and lots of interest in it, lots and lots of feedback. So that was amazing. But I'm really excited to be talking about this topic today too, Brad, because we are in tax season. The theme of the last few weeks has been around tax. And so what I've done is, I've mentioned this before, but we have a tax business as part of ours. And so I've spoken to the team yesterday, and I've asked them to clear their diaries and create some space, because I want to be able to offer an opportunity for our podcast community, if they do want to speak with an accountant who is very specific related to property and property tax deductions. I certainly wanted to give that opportunity. So if that's you can go to thepropertycouch.com.au/tax. And the topic that we're talking about today is very much in our wheelhouse. It's something that we do regularly. And so our team is able to help you with that. But mate, you have a very specific speciality around how people, particularly property investors, among other things, can maximize the amount of tax that they can get as a result of investing in property. So I've got lots of questions for you. But mate, just in case we've got some listeners who are not familiar with you, and I find that hard to believe, but just in case they're not familiar with you, mate, I'm just going to give you a little wind up here. You joined BMT Tax Depreciation in 1998 as a quantity surveyor, before becoming a director and shareholder in 2002. Since then, you've been instrumental in building BMT from the ground up and became Chief Executive Officer in 2015. As CEO of the largest and most trusted quantity surveying firm in the country, you continue to be a market leader, having completed, listen to this, folks, over 700,000 depreciation schedules and employing more than 200 people Australia-wide. Now, Brad, here's your honour roll. You are a member of the Australian Institute of Quantity Surveyors, the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, and the Auctioneers and Valuers Association of Australia. So this does allow you to contribute to and access the latest information within the quantity surveying and property industry. Now, as I round this out, mate, your knowledge as both a quantity surveyor, and I do know you are a property investor yourself, means that you are a highly sought after speaker. You regularly speak at national events, conferences, and to the media to share your knowledge with the wider property investment community, mate. So that's just in case anyone listening to this wasn't familiar with who you are. And as I said, you've been on a couple of episodes before, mate. So you are well and truly qualified to be having this discussion that we're having today.
It's great. And look, great thing, long story there, but great thing about I got my job at BMT. I was still at uni. I was doing work experience, and the things I've been able to learn through that about property investing, and I've really just got in and loved it, and bought a lot of property, hold a lot of property. It's been a great journey and a great journey of learning, and it's been quite successful as well, which is great.
Yeah, well, you are building a successful business, but it'd be fair to say you are quite. I don't know if obsessed is the right word, but you are a very active property investor. So you are not just talking theory, you're walking the talk, which is terrific, mate. But I'm going to kick it off today with asking a question that Ben and I have been doing for some time now, And it's around trying to get the discussion around the kitchen table being open with money, because my generation, parts of generations, particularly before me, it was a bit of a taboo topic, and not a lot was talked about, which we think contributes to some of the challenges that people do have fiscally around managing their budgets. But mate, tell us what it was like for you growing up over the kitchen table when you were a youngster regarding money and discussions with your parents and your family over the Sunday roast.
There wasn't much, I guess, is the answer to that. And I think in my demographic, I'm probably not unusual for that to be the case. And it wasn't that it was necessarily taboo. It just wasn't something that mattered in our family. I do come from very humble beginnings. I'm one of 4 children, and a dad that worked as an electrician. Nothing salubrious. They live in the same house they bought before my older sister was born, still now. And so investing wasn't something my parents probably understood very well or did much of. And talking about money, it was paper runs to get enough money to buy the next boat when I was a kid. You know, nothing's changed, just bigger boats and more different work. But it wasn't taboo, but it just wasn't talked about. We talked about, different things, I suppose, and holidays and what we're going to do next, which was a caravan out to the local caravan park, So, yeah.
Well, you're successful, as we said in that intro, both as a business builder and a property investor. Was there, how did that serve you, those discussions that you had over the table being not much? What did that look like as you went through uni and got your first job? And was money something that you found easy to master, or were there some obstacles and hurdles that you needed to overcome to make sure it didn't slip through your fingers?
Look, for some reason, I grew up as a kid that did save. I wanted things, and I worked hard. And one thing I guess I did get from my parents and my grandparents, for that matter, was you go and you do a job properly. So if you don't do it properly, don't bother doing it. I think it still rings true in me. Don't do half a job for my dad, or half a job Brad, or half a job whatever if you didn't do the dishwasher properly. But I think doing the job properly is something that I learned from an early age, and I still get frustrated with trades and painters sometimes in the same way. But that wasn't actually about money all the time. But for some reason, I think, when I did my careers in year 10 at school or 9, I come out as I wanted to own a business. I was probably thinking the local tackle store so I could get cheap hooks and sinkers. But obviously I went down a very different path, and I probably learnt, I would say, with all due respect to school, I still come out with next to no idea of money making, or really that much care for it. I started an economics degree, didn't like it. I had an interest in building. I'd renovated with my dad. I'd painted a lot to make money so I could buy things when I was young, and I saved to do that. But I didn't, it wasn't until later, it probably wasn't even, I suppose I was good at saving. I'd saved up some deposit for the first house, but it probably wasn't even really on my radar until I probably got my job at BMT. I was trying to save. You think about buying a house, but I learnt so much more once I did get there. And then I had more of a quest to learn after that, I suppose. Did a building degree. That was interest in building. I didn't know what a quantity surveyor was. It was an interest in, I thought I'd like to build things, really. And quantity surveyors estimate cost, don't build things. But that's where the interest came. And I've probably learnt the rest of the acumen after school, after uni, through doing the things I did for my job, and gleaning from others that, I like to make money, but it still often isn't actually just about making money. It's like I do business, we do it ethically, we do it properly, we try to make sure we service clients, we learn how to do what we do well and do it well. And, I heard someone give me their very simple business plan once, and it's made up of just, 4 words: to define, refine, validate, replicate. We've done depreciation schedules, right? It's a widget. It's not that simple, but to do it right is not that simple necessarily. get better at it all the time. Read the books on the client experience that just really impacted my life and what I wanted to do with my business. Like that's almost the simple business plan that probably came later in life for me. It wasn't, it was none of my learning was learning about the things I need to know to actually, I guess, be a technician. And it was only through reading things and listening and going to so many property seminars and things that I kind of changed my mentality towards wanting to learn and get better at doing those things. And the money, it doesn't always, but in many ways, the money kind of pokes out at the end, which I know is a bit naive in some ways, but it wasn't the key driver in the first place, because I think that gets in the way of so many people's aspirations or whatever, is that just going in to make money. Work out a good way that does make money, absolutely, but do it well so that you can shine over and above everyone else around you trying to do that in whatever it is you actually do. And I think it's a big piece of the key to the success of my business at BMT is just making sure that we always try to do things right. We don't always get it right. We muck it up sometimes, but then it's important about what you do about that, and important to make sure that, look, the intention is there. In COVID and things, it's hard to get inspections done. And I speak to a few accountants, and we're not in lockdown in Brisbane. I had one last week. The rest of us are, and my guys are all over the place, and it's difficult. But just get on the phone and have a talk to people about, we're here, we want to do it, and we care. We're not a big business now and don't care. I've run this business for quite a while now, and the mentality, whether we muck it up or not, is the same. We're still there about treating our little $700 jobs like gold every time where we can. And if you do that right and make sure the formula works, the money will come in the end, providing that the formulas work alongside that, of course.
Now, we're going to talk about depreciation, which is the topic of today, but it'd be remiss of me not to lean in a bit on that, because you are an experienced investor. You are one of the experienced investors in this country. You just talked about your money back story then, and it was not talked about and not really a focus, not really fast. So I'm interested, because you are a multiple property investor. Can you help us, what was running through your mind when you had to get the second one? Because obviously you bought the first one, you saw some opportunity, your dad was an electrician, you did some renovating. But what about when you started to build a bit of scale, not in your business, just in your property portfolio? What was some of the growth that you needed to do in your mind to be able to go property 2 and property 3 and so on?
Look, I don't like to admit to property number 2 very often, because there's actually some land that I still own that I haven't built on. But let's just park number 2 for a moment and go to number 3.
Straight to 3.
And actually, the land may have been number 3. They were a similar time, but I think number 2 was the first property I bought was in 2001. So it's New South Wales, Newcastle area, Georgetown suburb. Still own it, and it was. I was just on the back of, might have been early 2002. I was just on the back of a fairly solid boom of property that we had at that time, and I got a bit of growth straight away. I did some renovating. I went and got a valuation. I had this equity piece that I'd grown in such a short period of time by manufacturing it, and also just on the back of the growth. And it was easy to leverage into the next one. And then it was about learning about how to finance. And from there, the third one was another bit of a jump. I was renovating all over the place, 4, 5, 6, 7. It was just a challenge. And learning more as I could about those. I had renovations going on everywhere, and just really learning more about that on the way through, going to every seminar under the sun, listening or talking about tax depreciation, and listening to everything else and taking bits out of all of them and going, that's a good idea, reach this, that, think about that. And one of the biggest key things I think that I had to learn, or that I think we need to learn as property investors, is how to control finance, because that's how you control the property. That's how you control more than you could otherwise. I might own a bunch of properties, but the bank owns a chunk of them. And a lot of things have done very well, but knowing how to control finance, to cover risk through finance, I think is one of the key things that I had to get past. It was also the mentality. I grew up in a house where my parents bought their house just after they were married. I think they changed once before they had kids. And I didn't come from a take it on. I come from pay off your house over your life till you retire, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
That's what I grew up in. That's what my grandparents, that's how my grandparents were. I bought their house, actually.
Mate, nice. Because that's what I want to lean into, mate, because your parents bought the house, they still live in it. The mindset around that shift from buying your own house, paying it off, and that was it, to actually going to leverage, was that just an osmosis thing? You're in property, you're turning up at all these events, you're hearing all these people talk about multiple properties. So was it just a foregone conclusion for you, or was there still a few mental barriers you needed to overcome?
There's some mental barriers on learning how to sleep with the debt and how to deal with the debt, and that comes down to learning how to cover the risks and learning about the risks. And I guess through I did a building degree. There's a lot of training on risk through that as a construction manager. The whole, I guess, risk matrix that you need to consider is the same as a risk matrix for property investing or for anything else, or it's got some similarities. What's the likelihood and how do you cover those risks? You've got to get your mentality or your brain past some of those risks and look at just friends and even family that invested in property. And I don't know, it's all too hard. I think I need to sell them. Look, I was only having a discussion this week with one that I said, I don't know if it should, just close friend discussion. And they've made a lot of money in the last 6 to 12 months based on these properties by just holding firm. We've done the things, we've covered the risk. Don't I guess shy away from the prize in the end. And I think that's just come over time, especially in those sort of my first 10 years at BMT, from sort of first property buying or second or third in the early to mid 2000s. And then going I've got a lot of New South Wales property that was in a very flat market. So I renovated, I manufactured equity all over the place in order to keep that going, because I think long-term property does well. And I had to learn how to hold on through those things. And there was plenty of horror stories on the way. I was at BMT and there's lots of horror stories you can hear. Don't let them don't let the newspaper affect you too badly, I suppose.
Well, I guess you raise a good point. As a property investor, you need to be okay with looking at the horizon, because as soon as you look down, it can get a bit scary. And the analogy around that is, once you look at the size of the debt, that can make you wobbly. But if you lift your eyes, look back to the horizon, it's about, well, how much do I need to service the debt rather than how much is the debt? Because property is such a medium to long-term game that if you do look down too often, you will get wobbly, you'll fall off the tightrope. Tightrope's probably not the best analogy, to be honest, but you know what I mean. You've got to lift your eyes and focus on the right thing rather than, gee whiz, there's a few zeros on the end here. And like you say, someone's made some money over the last 6 to 12 months, but they're probably focusing on the wrong thing, the debt rather than the outcomes. That's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we call it. I call it the bucket money. How much money is in the bucket that you can access? Because the actual cash is the thing that allows you control of, I guess, your destiny, and you get to make decisions before banks, and that's really important. I think all of the time.
Oh, there's a quote. You get to make decisions before the banks. I like that a lot.
You pay them their interest, they leave you alone usually.
Yeah, no news is good news. It's like if you don't see a ref in the game, it's a good thing. If you don't hear from the bank, it's a good thing. Hey, take us back to, I see my timeline's right. Was it 9th of May, 2017?
Yep.
About 7:30 at night.
Sorry, I quivered when you said that date.
Yeah. It's a significant date for your world, right? And can you take us back to that? We've had to chat about this on our Facebook Live before, but the two podcasts that you've done previously were pre the change. So take us back to that night, and then my follow-up question is, as a result of that night, should anyone even bother getting depreciation anymore?
Yeah, good question. I've answered that many, many times since that fateful night in 2017.
So let's explain what happened on that night.
So look, I was at budget night in Parliament House and on a Liberal Party sponsored table of all things, the coalition obviously at the time, and we were working with the coalition just and political bias aside in relation to the negative gearing discussion that was around, that was on the Labor Party were talking about all the way back then. The coalition at the time took the view that they didn't want to change it, and they instead made some changes to the way we claim things like depreciation. They changed the travel allowance rules. But it was all, even though I was there and involved and talking data with them about property investors, because we'd done work with so many of them, it was a complete left field that come out on the night, and they just decided that second-hand plant and equipment no longer was able to claim depreciation. There was a little gap, I believe, in the legislation around the way second-hand plant items are valued, and it needs some more rigor and rules around that. But instead of changing that to saying, well, a 3-year-old stove, or it should be a 3-year-old stove, and a 15-year-old stove is worth nothing now because it's 15 years old, its life is gone. They just said, if it's second-hand, nothing. We'll give you no deductions at all. And they just made a major change to that against all residential property assets that were previously used, regardless if they're 1-year-old or 20 years old. I think there's a right way to fix that needed to be done, which is they just did a simple way and said no anymore. So lots of time was spent since in discussion around that and why it went that way. And I think it's lack of knowledge of the people that are involved in making the change. Just needed to change something. And I think that no claims against that. In relation to the second question there, is it still worth it, right?
Yeah. Well, before you go there, like it's kind of symptomatic of what we're seeing even through the negative gearing debate. And you've done a lot of work with Ben and Picker regarding this, that little consultation with the people who are doing this every day, right? So if they had to come to the likes of you and perhaps your competitors, right, and just said, what do you think about this? And you could have said, well, that potentially is a bit over the top, but what about tweaking it here? And there's some opportunity. But there just doesn't seem to be consultation with the people that are doing it every day.
And look, the consultation really all happened afterwards. Like I had Treasury hook up the next day because I was already kind of working with people there on data and said, okay, well, that's a little left field. Let's have a discussion. And we had a discussion with Treasury on what was it about and what they were trying to do. I then I felt a lot of my next 6 months in Canberra just educating the people that are making this change on what that were voting on the change, on what they were doing and what the real way to do it probably is, and put papers together to Treasury, papers together to the politicians. But the thing is that the announcement's been made, and if there's not enough people that complain about it, I think then I guess, well, it's easy to leave it where it is. And it was me, and look, I engaged with the Institute of Quantity Surveyors, absolutely. Had them on the phone the next day, met with some of the competitors and helped pen another letter from the Institute as well. And some of them penned their own. And I just went and felt like I lived there for 6 months to educate people, because we hold a lot of the market share, so there wasn't many others to do much, I suppose. And the way that change was made, I think, is just policy on the run, is my opinion. But and consultation before, there is a way to properly fix it. And I still do believe, I still liaise with those that made the change that are still around. And they're well and truly aware of a better way to do that. One day I'm just hoping they're going to listen, and I'll help them fix it, because it should be right, not wrong, I suppose, is the answer on the way things are treated. And there is a proper way to treat them that's not that difficult. It's not necessarily best for quantity surveyors. It's not the best outcome for quantity surveying depreciation business necessarily, but there is a way to get it right, and I'd love for that to be the case in the future. So if I achieve that, we'll date stamp this one day.
How hopeful are you of that nirvana, or that probably not nirvana for you, but that outcome being shifted?
There's definitely ears on it. It's just a matter of what's their reason to. But I mean, one of the barriers in my world in depreciation from the start is that education is the big thing. A lot of our business has been grown on education of investors that didn't know it was there and should or could claim it, and let's kind of help that problem. The fact that the knowledge level is low means that the knowledge level to try and change it is low, and therefore, although it's much better thanks to things like, the things we did so many years ago and everything I've been doing for 20 years, what knowledge is not there about how it works and the intricacies means that it's easy for it to keep under the carpet. as far as everybody else is concerned. And look, it doesn't make a ridiculous amount of difference to the claims. It's definitely not as much claim as there used to be, but it's not like it goes from lots to zero. So therefore, it's not as impactful as it could otherwise be. And therefore, people, other than me banging on the door a little bit there, I don't know if there's enough others banging on the door to try to change that. But we'll see how we go. I'm convincing usually.
I did ask you to answer the question about should we bother. Can you pause on that? Because I still want the answer to that. But just for those people who are listening to this, who are new to the game, let's answer two fundamental questions. What is property tax depreciation, and why is it important for property investors?
Look, yeah, we've jumped the gun and not even explained what it is there, Bryce. A bit of assumed knowledge. And for that, it's very simple. Tax depreciation is wear and tear on items in your property as an investment property. You're able to claim a deduction for what that wear and tear or decline in value of those items is. Sort of works similar to your car. If you've got a car, you drive it out of the place you bought it, it loses value. We understand depreciation when we talk cars, right? In property, the value of the items does a similar thing. Your carpet wears out, your stove wears out, your bricks and mortar fall over one day. They put a life on these things and we get to claim a deduction over time. The difference, the thing that people don't understand a little is that aren't I buying this property to appreciate in value? And yes, we are. The property value, we hope, if we get it right, goes up. But the actual items in the property, the carpets, as we said, do go down or decline in value or wear out, so we get to claim for that. Why is it important? Well, it's the second biggest tax deduction a property investor gets after your interest. Better than the interest one, because the interest you pay. You have to pay those lovely gentlemen and ladies at the bank, and you get a deduction for that against your property. Depreciation is a non-cash deduction. The average deduction out of our reports last year is about $9,000. $9,000 in the first year as a deduction. We search around and try to minimise so many costs and claim our dry cleaning and etc. in life, but average of $9,000, and lots of people don't do it properly or get it all. It just means cash. It's really that simple. It's more.
Well, it's at 30 cents in the dollar. That's a $2,700 deduction, and the cost of the report is $700. So you net two in front at the very least. So it kind of hints at the answer. I'm going to come back to that, but when I first started investing in property back in the late 90s, the idea of cash and non-cash deduction was such a powerful thing, because the non-cash deduction is what effectively enabled negative gearing properties to become positive cash flow. Because back in 99, I bought my first one. In 98, I started getting involved in helping others. And nearly every property that we were purchasing back then, mate, was positive cash flow, $6 a week, $7 a week, $9 a week. And what tipped it over the line was the depreciation and the non-cash deduction. And the buzz at the time was, you'll correct me with the legislation now, but back then you could go back 4 years. And if you could just update it, I think it's 2, but if you let us know, we could go back 4 years. So when people were getting this depreciation, this non-cash deduction, they were going, well, I haven't been claiming it for the last 5 years. And it's like, well, there we go. Go and get a Quantity Surveyor's report, go and redo the last 4 tax returns. And I had a mate at the time, Greg. This is back when you could buy a townhouse on the Gold Coast for $98,000. And he went back, did his previous 4-year tax returns, and got 20 grand back. And mate, that was the deposit that he bought on a couple of investment properties at the time, which was leveraged. So it just felt like magic. Now, clearly in your world, you talk about it every day, and any savvy property investor should be having a Quantity Surveyor's report. And we on the Property Couch recommend that people do as well. But it was so groundbreaking back then that it was like this non-cash deduction that enabled us to have positive cash flow was just amazing.
And look, yes, you're correct. They've sucked that back to 2 years instead of 4. I suppose they were a bit sick of giving their money back, and it's probably could be my fault.
Yeah,
I started in 98 and started educating investors, and that was one of the biggest things that we used to push. Like, you're not doing it properly, let's fix it up. And look, one key thing on that is, regardless of how long you've owned the property, just because if you've owned it, so you can only go and adjust 2 tax returns. Given where we are around tax time, I mean, don't do another one before you look at it, just in case there is two there. But if you've owned it for 5 years, 10 years, 3 years, you can still go back up to 2 years pretty easily. We've got to assess whether it's actually worth doing that, but going back to 2 is fairly simple. We just look at it, we get an idea of what sort of numbers might be there, see if it's worth looking at. And it's also not if you just haven't claimed anything at all, Bryce. It's also if you are only claiming 5,000 and it should be 9,000, you can actually go back and claim, amend and claim the difference. So, like, you think, I think your comment was you've been doing this for a long time, but we're still having this discussion every day. Yeah, we may have done 700 and something thousand of them, but there's still a lot that we talk to that go, how long has this been going on? And can I go back 2 years? Like, it's not. There's a lot of investors that are, and I think a lot of them are probably just doing not much as opposed to nothing, and don't really understand it. Get it assessed properly so you can get as much deduction out of it as you can. Legitimate ones, of course. We'd like to do that. So, yeah, so it's great. Going back, get some money from the tax office. Who doesn't like some money from the tax office? And who wants to leave it there? I don't like the way they spend it all that much. So,
they're not giving you any interest for leaving it in their bank account either. So, so I've answered this question a million times. So if I've answered it a million, you've answered it a billion, right? But mate, I'm a degree qualified accountant. I used to, my first job out of uni was I was doing tax returns, tax and business services for a chartered accounting firm in West Perth. And mate, surely I can do it, can't I, as an accountant? Because I just get the 2 volumes of Tax Act and I just run through the little schedule that's there. And clearly I'm tongue in cheek here, right? But for the benefit of educating our community, why can't your accountant just do it?
Yeah, look, the regular question is, I've got a good accountant, or doesn't my accountant actually look after that? A good accountant gets a specialist to do the specialist bits, I guess, is the answer. But the reason that you can't still do it, Bryce, is that these claims relate to an amount of construction cost. They're not about the purchase price or the value of the property. Different science. Value is what it sells for. Construction cost is how much does it cost to build it, or how much did it cost to build it. And the value on items for the purpose of depreciation is treated very differently to value of the house. I've done a construction management degree, come out as a quantity surveyor. Our expertise is counting bricks and estimating construction costs. So we don't build buildings, we tell you how much they should cost to build. Tax office says we want some real actual cost information if it's available, or we want an estimate done by a relevant professional, such as a quantity surveyor, is their words. So that came in 1997, that act, if you want to look it up.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So it's actually around compliance on construction cost, and even if you've got some of the actual costs, we still want to split up and maximise the cost of the things that we can claim as much as possible. Our reports, we're very happy for you to talk to accountants. We set up systems so they can easily share with the accountants. The accountants are our friends, not our enemies. We play with them all day. That's where most of our referrals come from. A good accountant should have the specialist that does something like this and cover the risk for them and for you as the investor.
Well, in full disclosure, mate, we've been colleagues, professional friends for a long time, right? So full disclosure, we in our business recommend your company, and on the Property Couch, we're going to have a link in the show notes because you offer a fee, a price, a reduced price to Property Couch listeners. So, and there are other quantity surveyors. So just so you know, Brad's our preferred, but there's others out there. I'm going to get to why the difference between quantity surveyors shortly. But I think you hit the nail on the head there. Because of the change back in 9th of May, the big question is, well, if you can't claim stuff that someone else has spent the money on, you can only claim what I've spent the money on, and I got the receipt and I hand that to the accountant. Doesn't that make the quantity surveyor redundant? But the building is the key to that answer, right?
Yeah. So the depreciation claims you make are made up of they used to be made up of. They're still made up of 2 areas. One, you get to claim against plant and equipment items, providing it suits the right dates. They're things like your carpets, hot water service, stoves, blinds, curtains, the things that they sort of knocked out of that change. And the other part's for the structure of the building, which makes up, now there's a few rules around this one, but it's the concrete floors, walls and roof, the hard stuff that lasts a long time. It's about the construction cost of that. Most of your construction costs is in your concrete, walls and roof, not in your stove. And so that part, it needs to be built after 1987 to claim it. It's got a few rules around it, but it does make up about 85% to 90% of the actual claim against the property. The other thing on that plant and equipment, it's knocked out, but it's only knocked out for someone who is buying a second-hand property or that it's been previously used. So if you buy a new property, you still get it. If you buy a commercial property, you still get it. If you bought your property before that date at 7:30 p.m. when I was checking on my steak, you still get it also. And if you buy new plant and equipment yourself, you still get that claim against plant and equipment. But yeah, well, the other piece you still get, obviously we've got some criteria to assess as to make sure it's worth it, but we do that before we go ahead and do anything. We can find enough information before we go and spend any of your money on a depreciation schedule to make sure it's going to be actually valuable.
Well, your reputation is that you want to provide value, you just don't want to collect people's fees. I've got a question from one of our listeners later, mate, to ask what to look for with the quantity surveyor. I'm going to ask you to be as agnostic as you possibly can, but stick around for that, folks. But you've touched on it with renovating, but just the 101s. If someone wants to buy a property established, because no one on the property couch buys brand new, mate, but they want to buy an established property and they want to get into the renovating game, what do they need to know about depreciation that's relevant to them in the current environment since that night?
Yeah, well, since that, so buying after that night, still, whatever it is that you buy, if you can't claim on a second-hand stove, there's still potentially other items in there under that building allowance. And it may not be that the original building's in the right date. It might be that someone's done a big renovation 10 years ago. Some of these things can contribute to deductions that may be there. So we'll want to look at ages and talk. So before you do the renovations, or even on the way through buying when you're crunching your numbers, you can get some indication of what deductions might be there. But if you're renovating, one of the important things to do is make sure if you haven't got a depreciation schedule when you've bought that property, talk to the quantity surveyor first, because there might be some things there that you throw away that might have some value. So we've kind of made the word up. We haven't made the word up, but
scrapping,
technical term, but scrapping is not the technical ATO term. It's writing off the residual value of items, but I thought scrapping is a bit easier.
Yours is a bit easier, yeah.
So when you scrap stuff, effectively, you throw it away. If there was still some depreciable or tax value, if you want to call it that, on those things, rather than claiming it over a period of time like you would normally claim depreciation, you potentially get to claim it straight away in a year, throw it away. And sometimes that can mean some substantial deductions. Call a quantity surveyor before you rip it out so we can see if there's any value in it. Once you do the renovation, you add things, you add cost, you add stuff that you've put in, and you want to make sure you depreciate those things in the future. But you've got the costs for those. We've got ways that you can get them into the schedule afterwards without too much difficulty, depending on how much work you're actually doing. But before is the important one. So you've got plenty of evidence of what's there and come up and cost it. So, if you get audited and we don't know what's there, it's a little hard. Get audited and we can see it all still, it's a little bit easier because you've still got it.
Can you give an example of what you described about the scrapping? Is there an obvious example for someone who's listening to this where that they need to call a quantity surveyor? We're going to stay agnostic here, mate. It's not the BMT show.
But that's fine.
If they call a quantity surveyor, what's an example?
So let's say I've bought a property that's 20 years old, and this one's not as easy, but let's use it because we'll make it a hard one. I bought a property that's 20 years old. Its kitchen's 20 years old, so it's a little bit tired. The kitchen and the property itself still gets all this building allowance component, Division 43. 20-year-old kitchen may be still okay, but you might be able to actually update that kitchen and get some more rent or a better valuation, etc. If you rip out that kitchen, I'm talking about the kitchen benchtops and the cupboards, etc. The kitchen is part of the structure of the building for the purpose of depreciation claims for 40 years. It's only actually lost half of its value. Only half of its value has been claimed because it's 20 years old. It's 20 years old, it's got 20 years left to claim, just like the rest of the building does, but you throw it away. Your second-hand stove in your kitchen, because it's second-hand now and you've just bought it, is worth nothing because of our changes. But the rest of the kitchen still has value that is half of its effective life left. So the quantity surveyor, if you're doing that, should be able to come up with a total cost for the Division 43 for the whole property, but should be able to separate out how much that kitchen would have been out of that, whatever total $200,000 is. And if that kitchen was $20,000, you've only actually claimed $10,000, or it's only lost half of its life, or it's had $10,000 available to be claimed. It's got $10,000 left. If you throw it away, that should be able to be an instant deduction in the year you throw that away because you chose to scrap it or throw it away. That's an example that gets a pretty good number.
Yeah.
A 20-year-old kitchen, you probably stick with it in an investment property. But if you choose not to, it might be a 25-year-old kitchen. It's just got that bit tired. It's got a 40-year life. It's got what's left. It's an ability to deduct that what is left in the time that you throw that away.
That's insightful, right? So let's logistically step that through again. Someone rips it out. It's in the dumpster. There's nothing you can do. They need to talk to you before they're about to go demo day.
Yeah, before your demo, call the quantity surveyor. Like if you think it's whatever. The thing is, unless you've already had it done, even if you have, when a quantity surveyor originally does a depreciation schedule, when we go to site, we collect a lot of information so we can do that, but we don't actually estimate just the cost of that kitchen. We do estimate the total cost. We need to pull out the plant and equipment items. The kitchen doesn't have a line item in a depreciation schedule as a value. So if you've done inspection, you should have enough. If you've done an inspection on that property as a quantity surveyor, you should have enough to come up with that information. But if you don't, you've got an opportunity to inspect it before you rip it apart. It's easier to do that rather than do it later. And whether it's just before you rip it apart or you should have had a depreciation schedule anyway because there's money there, either of those things, there needs to be enough information gained so you can actually work that out before you rip it apart. If you rip it apart and then I do something based on whatever half information you can find afterwards, then the tax office knocks on your door after this $10,000 claim and says, how'd you come up with that? Well, if you've got, well, Brad went there on the 27th of June and here's a photo of the kitchen and they put an estimate on it, that's a lot stronger than we pluck something based on a couple of rough photos from realestate.com somewhere that could have been taken 7 years ago and we don't know. So that's why we say do it first or call the quantity surveyor before you actually rip it apart. So you can just take advantage of those value and do it safely. The more information we've got, the more evidence we've got, the more likely we are to give it the maximum value because we can see, touch and feel it as opposed to having to go off half-baked information in the future.
Calling all renovators, you need to go back and listen to that again. That's important. That's money on the table that you'll be leaving if you don't action that advice.
You said we don't want to give it to all to them. We don't like the way they spend it sometimes.
They don't spend it well enough. So, okay, so that makes sense, right? So hopefully that's crystal clear for the listeners. Is there any value to be added? So you said you do the depreciation schedule and then someone goes and does a reno. What's the value of saying, okay, Brad, here's all my itemized costs. Can you put it into the report versus just giving that to the accountant? Is that a convenience thing to keep it all in one place, or is there something else above that?
So talk to us about what work has actually been done. And I'll probably run with two examples. Like if you've got the costs, I want them and I want to use them, right? That's the right thing. Do we need to split up some of those costs to help maximise the deductions is one question we need to get to the bottom of. If you get a kitchen, I was going to say mob kitchen company and whatever, or a builder to come in and do a $50,000 renovation on the house that includes a kitchen, part of a bathroom, some carpets, some bits and pieces. Not everything's going to be itemised in your bill necessarily. And the way we treat some of those things to come up with maximum deductions, you don't have supply and installation against your hot water service. You have supply of hot water service. We need to cost things properly to maximise it, firstly. So if lots, maybe you need help. If you just put a new stove in, you don't need me. we built inside, and not the BMT show, but we built a portal. If you've bought a depreciation schedule where you can actually go and make some amendments at no charge, you go in, you put a new stove in, you put your new stove in, fixes up you fix up your numbers by putting the cost of that stove on the date, and you can share those new numbers with the accountant and try to make it easy. So I'd like coming.
So that's a convenience thing, but the other thing you talked about was a structural. It's a strategy to make sure that you are getting the maximum you can go, and that's where the value add is.
So the value add of us getting involved is if we're going to pull it apart and maximise that deduction to get more out of it. That's when you want us. Otherwise, yeah, you can just add them yourself, make it easy, or give the receipt to your accountant. There's the ease of putting it into the same schedule. The old stove needs to be scrapped and written off. We can help to facilitate to make that happen. But there's a bit of a combination of both. And if you've got one or two things, charging you $50 to adjust thing is not the end of where I'm going to run my business from. It's doing the depreciation schedule at the start, getting them right.
It's not the game you're playing. Mate, I've got some questions from the listeners.
Sure.
And I reckon it'll be good to get your insights. So let's cut to the first one from Sharon Patterson regarding improvement versus repair.
Hi, Bryce and Ben. My name's Sharon, and I've been listening to your podcast now for quite a few years, and I love listening to them every week. My question is probably for Julia or for Brad. It's in relation to replacing a hot water service. It was leaking, so it had to be replaced. It wasn't an improvement. Because the cost was nearly $1,800, just wondering if that can be written off against my tax, or do I have to depreciate it?
There you go, Brad. Question around improvement versus repair. And my follow-up question after this is along similar lines as well. But what does Sharon need to do there?
The cut and dry simple answer to that is a new hot water service is an improvement and therefore needs to be depreciated as opposed to claimed instantly. Look, I'm all for anything that can be repairs and maintenance being claimed straight away. I try to do that with my own tax, legitimately, of course. If you are improving what's there, it's an improvement. If you are maintaining what's there, it's maintenance or repairs. If you put a new element in a hot water service, I would class that as a repair. You fix a hole in a hot water service, a repair. New hot water service, improving. It's better than the old one. I would hope you wouldn't want to replace it, but fix it instead. Improvement, fairly cut and dry answer. We work with the accountant on these things and put them where we want to, but I wouldn't be putting a new hot water service in as a repair because you're just attracting unnecessary attention.
Brad, the important point here is improvement versus repair. You need to get your head around that very quickly because that's a critical item for your tax. I'm going to go to another question from Mick, and it's very similar in terms of the lane it's in, but different circumstances, so we can reinforce the point for our listeners. Let's cut to it now.
Hi, Brad. Just a quick tax depreciation question from me. We have an investment property that is getting on in age a little bit now and has a concrete tiled roof. Some of the tiles on this roof are cracked and need to be replaced. The challenge we're facing is they are beyond repair, and we're finding it difficult to source tiles to replace them with. So the recommendation from our builder is to re-roof the house with a ColourBond roof, which makes sense. Can we claim this as capital works, or can we claim it as a repair? We're hoping we can claim this as a repair because we've been told the roof is not replaceable. Any advice would be appreciated. Cheers.
Related question from Mick, Brad, but what's your answer to that one?
Look, it's unfortunate, but I'm going to say improvement, especially because you're changing it to a ColourBond roof, but it would be the same if you weren't. Even if you can't find a couple of tiles that are quite the same, struggling to source them, there would be some way to either make a couple or get a few from somewhere secondhand to fix that. Repairs are repairs. And look, I can see the argument there, absolutely, but the tax office, I think, will look at that the other way. Once again, some of the words I heard used by a commissioner in the past around this, or it might have been a deputy commissioner, were like, the tax office needs to be practical about these things, right? And their intention, so they say, is to be practical about these things. What they need on the other hand is for the taxpayer or the person making claims to be practical as well. Practically, you are getting a better result out of an improvement as far as an improvement is concerned from a new roof. I put quite a few new roofs on houses. It's kind of annoying because it doesn't add that much value, but it needs to not leak. And, look, it's much improved with a new roof. I think you'll be fighting a losing battle on that one.
All right, good one. Good question, Mick. Let us know if that's been helpful. Next one is from Leonard. He's actually got two questions, so he's been a great contributor to this podcast. The first one, and I'm going to set you a challenge. You can't use the letters BMT in this answer. All right, so let's listen. Let's listen to the question from Leonard and see why I've set you that challenge.
Hi, Brad. How should investors go about choosing a quantity surveyor to work with? What can a good quantity surveyor do that a not so good one can't? And if depreciation values are determined by a set of rules, isn't the outcome going to be the same anyway, regardless of who we work with? And it's just a matter of picking who provides the best price. Thank you very much and looking forward to your response.
There you go, Brad. Now you know why I've said we've got to stay agnostic on this one. But I think we've covered the first bit around the set of rules and that, because you've covered that quite well. But it'd be great for you to help people understand why quantity surveyors aren't all equal. Let's say company A, who's good, and company B, who's not good. What's the major difference between the two?
Look, I wouldn't even say company A and company B. I would say quantity surveyor A and quantity surveyor B almost. The science of quantity surveying is estimating construction costs. So there isn't really, there is an estimation of a construction cost that needs to be done. And a quantity surveyor, a brick costs as much as a brick, right? And we could argue about the cost of a brick all day. But estimating the cost of a brick in a certain area could be different. So the science isn't an exact one, because sometimes you can pay different for the same amount of brick at a different shop, right? So we are estimating. Those numbers still should come out pretty close to each other if the quantity surveyor knows what they're doing. The difference after that is that the quantity surveyor needs to marry that up with a whole bunch of tax rules. So marrying up knowing how to cost a brick, and knowing out what we can claim what percentage of and how to cost those things as best possible for the purpose of maximising deductions are two completely different sciences. Quantity surveyor A might be good at counting and measuring bricks. Quantity surveyor B knows a bunch of tax rules. Quantity surveyor B, from, I will say, good company, as you said there, may also apply all of the tax rules properly. There's a lot of tax rules that need to be applied to come up with the maximum deductions, and also try to apply the percentages based on a lot of stuff that needs to be done in order to maximise those deductions, like putting things into low value pools and low cost pools over time will get more deductions in early years. Not all quantity surveyors that know that do depreciations have built their software to do that properly. Splitting reports properly for multiple owners gets more deductions in early years. There's been quantity surveyors that do that and some that don't, because it takes a lot of software work. We've done it, others have done it. We're not the only one while we're in agnostic land, but splitting the reports can make a difference, and to the deductions in the early years. The other thing, I guess, is really comes down to being thorough. Thorough includes making sure you know how to cost things, you go through the information in detail. I'm a firm believer in a site visit, COVID or not. You may have to wait a little bit because they keep locking down the country and never letting it out sometimes in order to get that done properly. But we've always used our staff to do inspections, and we like to do inspections. Let's go back a moment to our scrapping discussion. How do you really go back and hopefully get the right information from 5 years ago about some kitchen that may or may not have been there? And how do I go and identify absolutely everything in a property to maximise that deduction? Look, I can get it pretty darn close with what information I can see. But will I stand up on the line and say it's right when I've been there? Much more likely, because I've seen everything, I've got evidence on the day, and if I've got to argue for you in 10 years' time, I will, because I'll back what we've done there by actually being thorough and doing it properly. And that's not only us, that's also others that believe in that process. I don't think COVID should change that. Some of those rules mean that sometimes it might be a bit easier, but I just don't, when you're estimating, the more information you know, the more you're willing to push it onto an estimate that allows for everything that you see that sometimes photos won't allow you to do. And I don't think any of the digital stuff is quite as good or efficient as it can be. If we can get a full measuring Matterport thing that gives us everything to measure like you can get, but I don't have those cameras, and someone's still got to do that and take the right stuff when they go there. So it's difficult to do that. Thorough, know the rules, apply the ruals, Quantity Surveyor, Quantity Surveyor B. There's some fairly simple answers.
But Quantity Surveyor C, who is the budget, cut price, cheap. What are some of the corners that they're likely to be cutting to make that cost effective for them?
The first one's, we don't need to go to site. We'll just do it off the photos and information. We'll measure it off Google for you.
Send a drone out.
They existed before COVID. There's just a few more of them over COVID, because you know what? It's harder to go and do inspections. Do I love that and having to try to get through and manage my team across the whole country and cancel all their jobs and send them at home for a while sometimes at the moment, which doesn't work. Like, in order to do them, you can buy one for $200. You have to cut something out of the process, as far as I'm concerned, that's valuable to the process. It's not like you cut out either the inspection process, you cut out something about the knowledge around applying the rules properly, or you cut out things that mean less deductions. And then the experience across the way, we try to make sure we turn up. We don't want to bother your tenant at a horrible time for them. We try to work around them and make it easy for them, easy for your property manager. We're turning up between 9 and 12 is not something we do at BMT, because nobody likes that. No tenant likes that. No person getting furniture delivered likes that, including me. So I want to say we're there at 10. Give or take 5-10 minutes, and we'll call you if we are 5 minutes late. And you know what? That's making sure the overall experience is as smooth as possible for everybody, including your tenant who pays you the rent, and you should try to be nice to them as well. Absolutely.
Mate, let's say I just bought a property in King Island, in the centre of the island off the northwest coast of Tasmania. Are you going to send someone out to see it?
Did you buy one in King Island? Because that's
no,
easy.
Totally fictitious. You'd probably say you'd go because you want to throw a line in.
Yeah, well, look, there's lots of nice beef cattle farming over there, but it's very windy, I understand. I have some friends that have some farm over there. Anyway, I'd love to go to King Island.
Oh, but what about in the remote areas of Australia? I guess let's bunch it.
We get to a lot of the remote areas. Would I say it's 100% of the time it makes sense? Sometimes it's just impossible. And for can I do it and get it fairly close? Will it be slightly conservative the other way? Yes, and yes. But we don't want conservative means more than the difference in fee as a property investor to cut that corner. But when it's just completely impractical and it's 17,000 hours from anywhere, there's we can use what information is available and get it collected the right way. Just like training someone or getting someone a bit of information to know what to collect and guiding them through that is not impossible.
Yeah, there you go. So good question, Leonard. I've got another one from him. If someone's thinking, why is he getting 2 questions? Because he participated. The opportunity was open for everyone. But here's the second question from Leonard.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leonard, and I have a depreciation question for Brad Beer. We have a PPR, which we have lived in for 3 years. We are the first occupiers as we bought it new. Next year, on the 4th year, we will move out and turn our PPR into a rental property. I have 2 questions. First, how many years of depreciation deductions do we have remaining on the property? Will it be 40 years, starting from the time it became a rental, or 37 years, as the depreciation had already commenced when we lived in the property, but it was just not claimable as a tax deduction? Second question, will we still be able to claim depreciation on the fixtures and fittings because the property is rented out for the first time? Thank you.
Another good question there, Brad. And quite a few people will probably have the same one. So let's tackle it.
It is a good question. The answer, unfortunately, is there's 37 years left. The answer is, the good part of the answer is that there's 37 years left. That building allowance goes all the way through. It's a 40-year claim. It makes up 85 or 90% of the claims that you do get to make against that property. These claims for you start when you buy the property, when it was new, when you've lived in it. You just can't claim, the claims or the depreciation starts when you move into the property. You just can't claim it for those three years that you lived in it first. So you've got 37 years left. Most of those deductions are still there, but you will get caught up in this legislation from 2017, unfortunately. This is one where I don't think it's right because I only use the things for 3 years. And, things in your property like a stove have a 10-year life. You should get the last 7. The value at the start, 3's gone, 7 get to claims. But because of that legislation, you don't. You get caught up and stuck into that legislation that says, well, now that it's previously used, we suddenly call it worth nothing for the purpose of depreciation, which is sarcastically what I don't agree with.
But previously used, but still paid for by the owners.
Yeah.
So that's where it gets a little grey, doesn't it? Because they say, well, if you haven't paid for it, well, you're not entitled to it. Well, I have paid for it. I just 3 years had a little break.
And look, I was explaining the reason for this is they think everybody's moving their fridge from their home to their investment property and putting a big value on it and claiming depreciation on it. And I'm like, I've been doing this for 20 years, or sorry, it wasn't 20 then, it was more like 17 or 18. I've been doing this for 18 years and I don't see that as a major thing that's happening. There's another piece of legislation you need to fix around making sure that in that situation, you claim the rest of the value for the 7 years and not claim more than that. That's what they needed to fix, and I agree with them. But there's an easy mechanism to do that, as opposed to going, well, suddenly now it's a rental and it's worth nothing. Well, it's a good 3-year-old stove. It still serves a purpose. And as far as all the other things around plant and equipment and the way it should operate and depreciation should operate, and still does, and everything else, it doesn't make sense to do that the way they've done it. But yes, unfortunately, you've still got a lot of deductions there for 37 years. It does make up 85 to 90% of the deductions in total that you get to claim, but it is just a bit of a shame that they've mucked that one up and done it that way. In my opinion, I think we've got that already.
The glass is still 87 to 90% full.
Yes.
It's just missing a couple. So, all right, last one. Not sure it's totally in your lane, but let's have a little listen. This one's from Kim.
Hi, this is a question for Bradley Beer. Bradley, I often hear of people overcapitalising on their investment or even their home property. Is there a general rule you think clients should stay with for ensuring that they don't fall into this trap? Thank you.
Brad, this is probably you as a property investor more than a quantity surveyor.
Yeah, the only positive thing that happens out of overcapitalising if you're a property investor is you get more depreciation. But I don't condone spending more money than you should to get more depreciation. And look, that even goes to, I own properties that are old, that don't get much depreciation. It's not the most important thing. It's important and I love it, don't get me wrong. But anyway, overcapitalising, a rule of thumb is a little hard without any context. You could say, like a certain percentage of the property you should spend, and you can do those rules of thumbs, but that's a bit of a rule of thumb. And I think you probably need to be a little bit more detailed about this in relation to the property that you are renovating. What's the value of a good renovated property in the same street that's comparable to the value of yours as it is? How much can you spend on a renovation and still actually have some capital value increase at the end of that process? How much more rent do you get by spending a certain amount of money on that property if it's an investment property? These are number crunching exercises. There's enough data out there at the moment to get what's sold in your street and probably see hopefully some sort of photos if it was sold. Knowing what an unrenovated or renovated property is around your space is not that hard to find now. And then not getting attached on the way through is probably the other thing that happens. And, well, I'd really like a much better bench top because that'd be so much nicer to live in if it's an investment property. You need to think about the things you spend and not try to build your dream home all the time. And that's how you overcapitalise. And that's very easy. So you've got to get unattached to the process. On your personal house, the answers are kind of the same. But there's another question to be asked, that if I'm happy to overcapitalise because I do want a better bench top, so be it. Sometimes, as long as you can afford that, it doesn't always have to be a money-making exercise in life. Sometimes we do overcapitalise, and on your own home is one place that I think it's got its level okay, providing you can actually afford to do that. Of course.
Yeah, some things are measured by the heart, not the calculator, right? So, I'm going through designs at the moment to knock down, rebuild my house, and there will be a couple of things I reckon that I'm going to overcap on, but it's mate, I'm not moving for the kids will get this house, right? So it's a payback period that happens with that, and I think you hit the nail on the head too with what's the agenda? Is it personal or investment? Because investing, you want to think like an owner occupier, but you want to be a Scrooge McDuck along the way, because you want to get best perceived value for as little cost as you can. And the way you get the perceived value is to think like an owner occupier, which actually makes the most difference to the valuers and all those sorts of things. And obviously you call the quantity surveyor in to help you through the way. But
look, you've got to do things that make it safe, and then you've got to do things that make a difference. Things that, for what you can in the budget, what are people going to be attracted to? What's going to make this house more livable in the area that it's in? What's going to make it more attractive to the tenants, that are the ones that want to live in this area? They're sort of some of the questions, I guess, to ask yourself. And yes, good luck with that. Then good luck with that house building, Bryce. It's an interesting process.
Oh, yes, thank you. Good. Yeah, I'll lean on some advice. Trust me. So there you go, mate. With some great questions from the community. I want to say thank you to all of those folks who contributed, and we reach out to us. Anyone who is part of our all guest series gets access to a free start and build course. So we'll gladly give that to you. Leonard, you got 2 mentions, but only 1 course. Sorry, mate. But I'm sure you can watch it multiple times. But mate, I think that's been super helpful. As I said here at the top, we have had you on before. I'd certainly encourage people to go back and listen to some of those episodes that we've had. We'll put the details in the show notes. But what's been really important here is to give us an update on depreciation since that fateful night, and just to reinforce and remind people that it's still really, really important. I get quantity surveyors reports. Ben does. We recommend our clients do. We encourage our community to, right? So it's important. Don't leave money on the table. It is your money. Get it back. So, we are in tax season. So lots of people are getting tax returns. We've had a couple of guests on. Ben and I spoke about it last week, Brad. We've also started our tax business at Empower Wealth. So we encourage our clients to maximise the deductions they can get, and depreciation is one of those areas. Just go to thepropertycouch.com.au/tax. As I said, I've created some room in the team's diary just so that we can talk to our community and help them out, and we get a quantity surveyor's report. So, mate, I think it's been helpful and insightful that you've been able to sort of come on and update the crew. Any I'm nervous about this because it could become, the advertisement show, but any other sort of things that people should be aware of in the space of depreciation to make sure they're making better decisions in this tax season?
Look, don't miss another year. I think we've covered most of the things there. And the other probably thing I think is, before you go into anything, just crunching numbers. There's simple calculators we've got there to help you do that. You guys help your clients do that, crunch the numbers. Know what you're going into from a cash flow point of view before you get there. Calculators and depreciation can help you with that. But depreciation is not the only thing either in there, as I said before. So I think we've covered a pretty good wide range of stuff there, Bryce. And don't be scared. Bring it on, have a go.
Bring it on, have a go. Which reminds me about Mindset Minute earlier, and we didn't get to that. But that is your I'll set that up even better. What is the Mindset Minute from your perspective, mate?
Oh, look, something I've called my boat that once, side that boat, but I think bring it on. Like anything, bring it on. Give me a challenge, bring it on. If it's hard, if legislation change was hard, I wouldn't say bring it on by choice, but I've got it. Bring on the results. What are we going to do about that? Rebuild our stuff, make it happen. And I think in life, you've got to have a go at some things, and investing in a property, go learn about it, and let's have a go. I think so. Bring it on. It's probably that.
Yeah, I like it. And your life hack today too, mate, is you've touched on it today, but It's around crunching the numbers. Where has this been really important to you? Clearly you're in the business that's crunching the numbers, but what about putting some of those deals together that you did for your own portfolio? But what sort of comfort does it bring to you when you are getting in the detail around the numbers?
Look, I think crunching the numbers, I need to know what my downside looks like. Like how do I cover my risk? Or what's the pessimistic scenario actually look like? Crunching your numbers is the way that's going to work that out. When I crunch numbers, I probably do them a little bit more on the back of the envelope now than I probably did back in some of those days. And because I understand the numbers well, and I think, for anyone that's not as experienced and understands the numbers as well as someone like me probably does, learning how to really crunch those numbers is even more important. I can make a couple more mistakes based on the number of properties I've got and the risk I've covered than probably you can afford to in early stages. I've made them on the way through. I've got close to the line where you got too many renovations going and haven't refinanced and revalued and got the cash out of things before. Absolutely, but I think crunching those numbers is just important for any investor at any stage. So I love to make sure numbers are crunched.
Love it. Good life hack. There you go, folks. Make sure you heed that advice. Now, what's making property news? It'd be remiss of me to not talk to you about the recent announcement by the Labor Party to not take negative gearing and capital gains tax proposal that they've had in the last two elections to the next election. You're really busy with Ben in Picker, advocating on behalf of the property investor. Clearly, you'd be excited about that. But what's your feedback? What's your commentary? And do you feel like the race is one and done, or do you think that there is opportunity for other stuff to come out sideways somewhere else?
Look, they took that policy to two elections, and neither of them, even the unwinnable, got lost. And look, it's not only based on that. I think the credits for the credits that all the retirees that didn't like so much being taken away were also probably a pretty serious factor. Negative gearing sometimes is not popular with the voter base in some ways, but I think sometimes that comes down to an understanding and the fact that I think negative gearing is a point in time, and getting rid of it probably affects many mum and dad investors trying to get in and nurses, etc. We've all seen what's written, and I don't think it's a bad thing to try and provide for your retirement by investing in property. Can we look at the moguls that have 50, I don't know, whatever? Will they look at some sort of cap in some way? Possibly, and is it necessarily the end of the world to do that? Probably not. I mean, there's a level of fairness that we want to have, that someone that needs it can get a leg up from those sort of things. But the people with lots of properties are generally often not necessarily as negatively geared anyway, because they generally have more cash over time from properties they've owned over time that have increased in rent. There's a lot less negative gearing going on in my life than there is in someone that buys a property now that gets into the market and starts. So the problem with them changing that for people with more properties or capping it or whatever is that it won't actually make enough difference to the budget to bother. And they're not going to win the hearts and minds of the voters on that, I don't think. Could they do that? Possibly. Would that be in the world? No. That was touted by the coalition at the time, and instead we got depreciation changes. They decided they weren't going to touch it, which had some sort of that effect because it reduces the deductions that are available, just not done quite the right way. I guess I'm happy to see it off the agenda because I don't think it's actually done quite the right way, and it probably affects the mum and dad trying to provide for retirement a little bit more, and look, a little bit more than it should. And there's been a lot of price growth, ridiculous price growth over the last little while that we've seen in the market, and I don't think the stats show it's definitely not driven by investors. It's definitely not driven by negative gearing. It's driven by owner-occupiers and building grants and otherwise. I'm sort of happy to see that off the agenda. I suppose it's not great for business either, but philosophically, I don't have a major problem with it as it is, or something similar to what it is going forward.
And the invitation still exists from when we went into the debate around negative gearing prior to the election, that the likes of yourself and Ben and we're open to have conversations to look for opportunities to make it fairer tax system for everyone without penalising the bigger picture of people wanting to self-fund their own retirement. And as you say, the people who are wealthy generally are in positive cash flow territory anyway, so they've got to pay the tax on it. And those who are negative gearing are the ones that are actually trying to, to borrow your thing, just do it right, get it, bring it on. Like they're trying to bring it on themselves and actually say, well, I'm going to self-fund myself. I'm not going to rely on anyone else. So we shouldn't be penalising that sort of. That's one of the beauties of living in this country, that you get
the
that.
Stats show that negative gearing's. I can't remember the stats now, but a large portion of them are in that. A large portion of negative gearing is claimed at that rate at 37 cents in the dollar. It's not all the high income earners that claim all the negative gearing. They get a bit more benefit when they do, but it's not where it all is. It's quite a small percentage of it as where it lives.
And ATO data says that 91%, a bit over 91%, are one or two. So about 73% are one investment property and 91% is one or two, right? So,
and our data, which we were pulling back in 2017, showed very similar numbers. It was about 90% of the time. It was a bit over 90, a little higher, that had done either one or two depreciation schedules. It was about over 80% had only ever done one.
Wow.
We're not all of the market, but we ran that across a few years of numbers. And it's not like the number of people out of, I think we assessed 300,000. We didn't do the whole ever. And there was 500 that had ordered more than 10 or something. Like there's not massive numbers that have in our data either that have heaps and heaps of properties. I mean, they may not have done them all either, but we took a pretty wide cross section to see that.
Well, that's important intel, right? Because if you can demonstrate value to your customer, that there is value in getting a depreciation schedule, it doesn't make logical sense that they would not pull the trigger on other properties if they have them.
Yeah.
So, and in some cases they might be too old, right? So it's not a perfect science, but it's relevant recent data, because the ATO data that we're pulling on is what they release, and it's usually got a lag of 3 or 4 years for everyone to catch up. But your data's more up to date, right?
Yeah,
so
our data on some of that is we do some comparisons with the tax office data, and the amount that we claim that comes out of our reports each year is the new ones coming out soon, the next Maverick, the newsletter, and there's a big disparity between the average claims in the same year on our reports and otherwise. But one issue is that the tax office calls you someone that's claimed depreciation if you're just claiming your stove. So that does mess the numbers up a little bit. But we try to get it as eggs for eggs as we possibly can. But the average is just because you're claiming doesn't mean you can claim everything you can claim. And our when we pull data, we don't just survey 50 of them and say that's what everybody does. We actually pull it across all our data. So I think that's more, or as much of the data we can clean for it whenever we put some stats out on what's happening within the investors that we deal with. Because I think it's good to have some real numbers on that, wherever we possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, mate, it's been really insightful. Thanks again for co-hosting with me today. We've tapped into your subject matter expertise. Hopefully the message is loud and clear to any property investor listening to this episode. If you don't have one, make sure you do. And there is a strategic opportunity, if you haven't had one for a couple of years, to see if you can go back and get the maximum deductions you can before you lodge your next tax return. So very, very timely in this tax season. But again, I've parted the diaries on the team and they can help you out. So if you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/tax, leave your details. We will reach out to you and we'll help you maximize all of the deductions that you got. But Brad, mate, always a pleasure to catch up with you. Thanks for sharing your insights with our community. And maybe Ben doesn't have a job when he gets back.
Thanks. I'm sure he'll have a job, talk about some white summer. I hope he's having a great time. So always great to be here. Thanks, Bryce.
Yeah, thanks, mate. And as Ben would normally sign off at this point, he's not around. So I'll say, but folks, knowledge is empowering, but only if you act on it. See you next week, folks. Hey there, folks. Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listened to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now, for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarises the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.